Our first guest, though, actually sent a letter to the Secretary of State urging the Biden administration not to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal. Right? Joining us now, though, is Congressman Rob Wittman, a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, good to see you again.
Sean, great to be back with you.
So Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, was on Air Force One today, and she was talking about the difference between how Trump handled it and Biden is now handling it. Take a listen to her response.
I would say that we are not following the same tactics of the prior administration. Aside from putting forward a peace proposal that was dead on arrival, we don't think they did anything constructive, really, to bring an end to the long-standing conflict. Our focus and our strategy here is to work through quiet, intensive diplomacy, and he's been doing this long enough to know that the best way to end an international conflict is typically not to debate it in public.
Look, here's the funny thing. The Trump administration got the Abraham Accords going. People were moving towards peace. Country after country was joining it. These guys get in office, and people are firing rockets at each other.
That's just the point, Sean. Think about this. During the Trump administration, there was a peaceful Middle East. There were the Abraham Accords, historic agreements between Israel and Arab nations. What do we see today? We see violence breaking out there. We see war breaking out because of Iran's support of Hamas. Think about this, too. The Biden administration has put in place folks that were in the Obama administration to fill these foreign policy posts, the same individuals that authored the failed JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, and were over the failed Iran policy there. So listen, in quiet diplomacy, silence is not diplomacy. Silence when you see what's happening in these attacks against Israel, silence is inaction. It's unbelievable that somehow think that that's the appropriate policy going forward.
Exactly.
Yeah. As Sean mentioned, you sent a letter to Secretary Blinken urging the administration to stand with Israel, our ally. I want to read part of that for our audience. You said, instead of standing alongside our ally, Israel, President Biden considered not only taking pressure off Iran, but providing them with billions of dollars in sanction relief. Iran could then use these billions of dollars to fund Hamas, a designated terrorist organization, even as they attack our ally in an attempt to escalate conflict between Israel and Palestine. The longer President Biden considers this weak and misguided course of action, the more it emboldens terrorists in the region, thereby placing Israel and Palestine civilians' lives in greater danger. You know, as you mentioned, we gave money to Iran before. It didn't work out. They didn't denuclearize as they were supposed to do, and it feels like we're not learning our lesson with Iran here.
The bottom line is Iran is not trustworthy. We've learned that. We've seen that if you give in to Iran, they are not going to change their course. They're going to continue to support proxies in the region like Hamas who go after Israel. They are going to continue to use the resources that we free up through lifting of sanctions or allowing the assets that they have abroad to now be utilized. They will use that to support organizations like Hamas. Think about it. The missiles that are being fired into Israel today were built in Iran or were built with materials from Iran. Iran is directly supporting these attacks on Israel, and Israel has the right to protect itself. That's what's being missed in the discord today among the major media.
You know, what does it say, though? I mentioned President Biden asked Netanyahu to have a ceasefire. Netanyahu says, no, I'm going to continue the airstrikes. What does that say about the relationship that we have now?
Well, why would you ask Israel not to defend itself, to say, listen, let down your guard, allow Hamas to continue to attack civilians in Israel? Israel's going about it the right way. They are attacking military targets.
No. Just to be clear, Congressman, I agree with you. They're going about it the right way, but it's amazing. You have the President of the United States telling the Israelis, please don't do this, and they go, thanks for that. We're going to keep going. That's a big snub.
It is, and it's telling Israel, don't defend yourself. Give in to Hamas. You know, take your guard down. Allow your citizens to be attacked and killed. I mean, how does that reflect on the United States that's supposed to be a friend of Israel? That's not what a friend would say to another friend.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the crazy thing is the narrative from the left right now is, well, Palestinians should be able to defend themselves as well. But Israelis are sending humanitarian aid to those individuals. Hamas is the terrorist group. They want to protect Palestinians themselves. So why does the left keep pushing this narrative that Israel is the bad guy?
I don't know. It just confounds any sort of common sense to look at our ally, our friend in the Middle East, and look at what's happening with Iran and supporting Hamas, who Iran is not our friend. Iran is openly hostile to U.S. interest in the area. It just seems like the whole world is reversed. I mean, it should be the other way around. They should be vocally supporting Israel and then putting pressure on the Palestinians and Iran to stop this. But yet it's the other way around. They're trying to say to Israel, listen, don't defend yourself. Give in to these terrorists. It just is illogical.
Yeah. Congressman Wittman, thank you for sharing that. And I appreciate you sending that letter because we, as Lindsay said, we can't be doing this all over again. We sent pallets of cash once before. We shouldn't be doing this again. I appreciate your leadership on this issue.
Thanks so much, Sean. Thanks so much.